All About Relationships is an engaging, lighthearted, and practical show designed to help people improve their relationships in meaningful ways. Hosted by Dr. Don Allen, a certified Gottman therapist, as well as an advanced trainer for the Institute. He is also certified in emotion-focused therapy. With over 40 years of experience in the field of psychotherapy, Dr. Allen is here to provide expert guidance on strengthening marriages, parent-child relationships, friendships, and more. Through insightful discussions, audience call-ins, and guest experts, viewers receive real-world strategies to enhance intimacy, communication, and overall relationship satisfaction. So now, please welcome the host of All About Relationships, Dr. Don Allen.
And we're back. Welcome. This is All About Relationships, working towards ideal marriage and loving, lasting relationships. I'm Dr. Don Allen, and I'm going to be talking with you for the next hour about some very interesting topics. As a matter of fact, in our episode 7, I did this show and I decided to do a part 2 because it was for me so fun, but also got a lot of good feedback on wanting to know more. So the title of our show today is Good and Bad Habits When Communicating with Our Partner, part 2. So if you recall on the last one, what I do is I give you a way of a couple communicating, and then I pause. And what I want you to do is to say, hey, do we do that or not? If you don't do it, great. But you can also listen to my best practices for how we should resolve it and see how close you came. But if you do, oh my gosh, we fall into that all the time. So then what I want you to do is listen to the best practices in terms of getting out of that pattern. Okay. One thing I always say is, we don't want to feel in trouble here. We don't want to feel called out. We don't want to feel bad or shame or blame. Nothing like that. What we want to do is we want to be curious. Gee, I wonder why that happens. Why that happens. So that's what we're going to be talking about again today. And I hope you like it, and I hope it's as good as it was the last time we did that. So just a few things I always like to say, is first thing is, what have I done for my relationship today? Well, the good news is today you're watching my show and you're going to get some really good things to go back and play with for the week. So again, no pressure at all, just have fun. I always work towards being spontaneous in relationships. The more we get into controlling, the more it starts to have trouble. So we want to move towards that happy-go-lucky, spontaneous with our partner, the kind of things we had when we were really clicking when we were young and first dating. Okay. So part of what I want to talk about today is what goes into successful relationships, but also what goes into undermining relationships. And that's, as you can tell, what we're going to be talking about today. Sometimes we talk about what destroys relationships, and we're not going to be doing that so much unless people ignore this stuff and really start going down that elevator to destruction. Last week, we had a wonderful host on, or a guest rather, Bill Bumbury, and he talked about his book, Healing the Trauma from Infidelity. And I'm happy to tell you, after our show, he's going to be coming back at the end of the month. So people stay tuned for that if you want to know more about his book and some really good suggestions on how to find a way back, even if it's something that difficult. Okay? So my hope is this program will be interactive. I always welcome you all to go ahead and contact me. I'll put my stuff up on the board. What's nice about this is that, again, when you watch the rerun of it, you can stop it and you can look at that. But I welcome any kind of feedback or comments that you might have that can help the show be better. Remember, a lot of people, when you ask questions or you wonder what's going on, there's a lot of people out there that are saying, oh, I'm so glad somebody asked that. We're all in this boat together, right? I always say, I'm not a guru. If I don't do this stuff, I fall into the same patterns and bad habits as everybody else, and potentially the consequences of that. So what we want to do is steer far away from the bad and move towards best practices. And even though I talk about some of the bad ways of communicating or poor ways of communicating, we're going to go right to the good, which is, how do we make this better? Okay, so let me give you some questions that just kind of gets us going, kind of whets our appetite for my show today. Okay, so here we go. Have you ever tried to fix a problem with your partner only to end up in a fight about something completely different? So here you are starting out here and you just meander to something else, right? You ever do that? Do you ever feel like your relationship gets stuck in patterns that don't make sense in the moment? They feel so familiar. Oh, here we go again. But then they repeat, right? You ever do that? So if that's happening, I'm glad you're listening to me today because we're going to talk about those things. Next one. Were you ever happy that you were finally in a marriage or relationship because your childhood issues um, would no longer be an issue? That now we have a 2.0 and life is going to be great. And I don't have to deal with all those disappointments that I had when I was a kid, right? You and your partner were finally going to end all that misery. But as time went on, you found either a new version of the childhood stuff or theirs, right? Or that you're repeating that same old childhood stuff, right? Or, hey, how about this? Does your partner feel that way? So these are really good questions for you. So I hope if some of this is intriguing, you'll stick around because we're going to have fun talking about these types of issues. And again, how to get out of those traps. Okay. So let me just talk a little bit or just reflect a little bit on kind of what goes on with that. This is kind of the regrettable stuff from days gone by. Okay. So many times when we grew up, we were exposed to ineffective ways of communicating. Now, one of the things I notice in my travels is that I think every generation has some of this, but every generation found the best way they knew of remedying it. But we have a lot of sophistication that we didn't have even 50, 60 years ago. You know, the stuff that we do well, my parents were never exposed to that. You know, people way back, even in the 60s, only more wealthy people kind of had psychology and all those types of things. And we found we relied on things that didn't really work well. One of the things, I'm a baby boomer, but one of the things I'm most proud of is how much we've advanced women so that they can be in important positions and they can have their own resources and their own money, and they can be respected in ways that they probably weren't when I was a kid. And I really like that. Now, do we have to go more? Yes, absolutely. But I'm pretty pleased with the fact that we did advance that cause. So every generation is going to find new ways to do things. So we want to understand that because, again, part of any relationship is to be forgiving and curious rather than resentful and distancing. Okay, that's very important. Now, again, I always say safety first. There are some relationships that can't happen. But the research suggests overwhelmingly people usually can find a way back. Okay. So one of the things that I talked about before too is we experience this thing called limerence when we start really falling in love. What that is a bunch of hormone chemicals that are designed to get us to mate. And not only mate, but have kids and stick and stay with those kids and our partner. So we start off with all of these extra energies and all these extra hormones that just think life is great and there's nothing wrong with our partner and there's nothing wrong with me. And we're super into that spontaneous and everything is wonderful. But that's designed to wear off. Right. And I talked about that in past shows. So I'm not going to take too much time with it today, but I invite you and I encourage you, go back and watch past episodes because I talk about that in length. Right. But often when we get disappointed with our partner, it begins to lead to old habits. And some of those old habits might be ineffective. So what we need to do with that is we need to be aware of it and have good countermeasures. Right. Now, one of the things John and Julie Gottman say, and I like to really quote them because I think that's the best research out there for helping us, is that there's only one good marriage or relationship. There's a million bad ones, but only one really good one. Leo Tolstoy said the same thing about families. So all we have to do is pay attention to best practices. What is the best way to handle it? So I'm going to give you those today. That's what we're going to be talking about, right? So what we want to do is, again, replace the bad habits with the good ones. But please remember, you've got to practice them. You're not going to do it once and then, oh, everything's great, because those old habits can keep coming up until the new ones are strong enough to say, this is better. So we're going to do that. Okay. So sometimes the other thing is what we learned wrong is um, driven from fear. Our body says there's a danger cue or it's dangerous. So we want to take countermeasures to protect ourselves. And many times when we protect ourselves, we're pulling away from our partner. I prefer that vulnerable intimacy and a trusting relationship where you can solidly take care of yourself, but you can lean to your partner when you feel vulnerable. So we're going to really, really look at that. So this is my show today, Good and Bad Habits when Communicating with Our Partner, Part 2. Want to again shout out to Barry Litt, Litt. I went to a conference and I saw him talk a couple weeks ago, and just wanted to shout out to him again because his lecture kind of inspired me to go back and remember some of the old stuff I learned about 30 years ago and put this show together for you. And by the way, since I've done this show, Barry did reach out to me on email and say that he watched the show, he really liked it, and that he enjoyed hearing all of the things that we were talking about. So again, I want to shout out to Barry, and hopefully he'll watch the show and enjoy this one too. What I try to do, and I mention this here and now, but what I like to think of is this stuff that we're talking about. Was it true 2,000 years ago? And is it going to probably be true 2,000 years from now? Because I don't want to get into the current things. I don't want to get into political, pop culture, all that stuff. Because what we want to do is have a compass that gets us through our lifetime in a way that what always works. Sometimes we have music, we have literature, and we say they're the classics. And what a classic is something that never grows old. It's just always good and relevant. Well, that's what I try to do on this show. So I hope you notice it, and I hope you see me trying. And if I don't do it, let me know. I'll correct myself. I always love good feedback. Okay. So let me look at my time. And we've got a few minutes. Let me do one of these. And then we're going to continue to do this, particularly in episode or in the third segment of our show. So here's one of the pitfalls. Now, remember our game. 1, safety first. 2, I'm going to give you a pitfall, and you're going to ask yourself if, wow, do we do this, right? Now, if you do it, one of the things I invite you to do later is to watch the rerun of the show with your partner. Say, hey, listen to this one. I think we do this. And then I want you to think of how you do it, talk about it, and then I'm going to give best practices, and then we can come back to it. In our second segment, I'm going to take some of these from the mailbag, and we can look at that in terms of what people are asking. So let's have some fun with this. So here we go. The first pitfall. A partner shuts down affection or sex or caring in a punishing way that erodes that trust and intimacy. Okay. Ever notice that happens? If somebody gets mad and they say, well, then I'm going to withdraw from you, you see. But one of you, whether it's intended or not, feels punished for that. Okay. So a partner might say, hey, you made me feel bad, so don't expect me to be close to you tonight. So the partner responds, fine, then why should I even bother trying at all? Got to pause. Does that ever happen to you? Right? So I want you to think about that while I just kind of vamp for a second. And then I'm going to give you best practices. So just wonder if that ever feels like it happens, or maybe it actually does happen. I don't know. Okay. So we want to be intimacy based, not power and control. Okay. So one of the ways you might say that is, hey, I'm hurt and I need some space right now because that hurt my feelings, but I still want us to reconnect once I've cooled off. Right? So rather than shut down and kind of show in retaliation or rejection, what we're doing is saying, hey, ouch, that hurt. I need to settle down a minute. And then I want to come back and reconnect, right? To reconnect with our person. So first thing we want to do internally is say, why were we hurt? What was the feeling? What was the thought? Second, why was that our countermeasure? Third, do you think that's the most efficient way of doing that? Where did I learn that? And then what we want to do is turn to our partner with vulnerable intimacy. Ouch, that hurt. I want to settle down a little bit and then come back and talk a little bit more about it. Okay. I do have a show on what goes into good sex, and I have a show in the past on what goes into that intimacy kind of connection. So, like I said, I'm not going to take a lot of time today, but let's have fun with seeing if it happens in our relationships. Okay. So, the other thing I want to do before I break is I want to go to the Gottman reinforcer, because you notice all of this stuff might be object relations theory. That's a fancy word for us in my field. But the Gottman reinforcement is don't stonewall. Instead, go to self-soothing and scheduled repair. Let's come back and repair this. It supports that emotional availability, as well as it's the cornerstone of building the trust pillar and keeping positive sentiment in our relationship. So that's the answer to that. We're going to do a lot more on our show today. So I hope you stick around, and we're going to pause for a break. And then when we come back, we're going to go to the mailbag. And then we're going to go to more of these kind of questions. So let's have some fun, and I'll see you in a minute.
Mike Zorek, a three-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a six-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2/3, and 2/4. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zorek, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorek has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
And we're back, and welcome to the second segment of my show. I like to go right to the mailbag. We still have our theme, which is, best practices. How do we get out of the pitfalls and move towards that spontaneous, vulnerable intimacy that allows our partner in, but also allows our partner to let us in? That's what we're doing today. So my first question from the mailbag, what I call shrink wrap, is this one. My partner always assumes the worst about me when I make a mistake. How can we break that cycle? So my partner always assumes the worst about me when I make a mistake. Okay. Well, one of the things that I want to notice right off the bat with this question is my partner always. So one thing I want you all to do at home is whenever you catch yourself saying always or never, it's probably always or never wrong, right? So what you want to do is say, wait a minute, rather than say always, you want to soften that. But that's just a red flag, right off the bat. So, one of the things I might say is my partner, I worry, many times might assume the worst about me. See, I kind of hedged that a little bit. Plus, the other thing I did, if you're talking to your partner, you leave room for their opinion between you both. It's very important, because what I don't want to do is have a monopoly on what reality is. I want to make sure that I say, this is kind of how I see it. How do you see it? So we're gonna practice that. That's one of those things that we want to look at when we see always or never. So my partner always assumes the worst about me when I make a mistake. Okay. So watch the horseman here. If you notice, see what you do. You always see the worst about me. See how you are, see what you do. That's one of the 4 horsemen. That's criticism, right? So what we want to do is make sure that we make that in the form of a complaint not in a form of a criticism. Okay. So what we want to do is to check our assumptions, and we want to get back down to what you're trying to communicate in the first place, because that's extremely important that that come across. We don't want to minimize that. We just want to say it in a better way. So practice curiosity, right? So one thing you want to ask yourself internally is, what happens inside me when I feel disappointed by my partner? What happens inside me? So one of the things that you want to do is you want to win together. You want to win together. So you might want to say something like, sometimes when I mention things and I don't do really well, it seems like you really feel just bad things about me, not about what I did. So, what I need from you when that happens is to maybe say, hey, when that went the wrong way, it made me feel disappointed, right? And then you can talk about it. Now, the person saying it wants to be more gentle. Hey, when that fell short of what I wanted, it really disappointed me. And maybe even give why. It really disappointed with me because I had mentioned I'd wanted it this way. And it seems like you didn't listen to me, or it seems like what I was asking wasn't important. Give some descriptor about why that was disappointing to you. See, now it's a complaint, right? And then send it back to them. So one of the things I want to say is, did you notice that? What do you think? So now you're giving them back. So you're sharing that different subjective reality. So that can really, really help if you have that problem. So let's go to mailbag number 2, right? This one is, I feel smothered by my spouse's constant need for closeness, but I don't want to push them away, but I'm feeling smothered. Right? So what happens with that? Well, if you think about it, what happens is there's kind of a blending. It's kind of one thing we all want to do is have a sense of where I begin and another person ends, and where they end and I begin. You want to have a sense of you, but you also want to have a solid sense of them. So when that kind of gloms together, sometimes it leads to fear, and that needs to be discussed. And because people are not efficient at communicating, requires conversation. So what do we want to do with that? Okay. So what I put down here for the antidote, and I always say, think about whether or not you guys do that. So what you want to do is you need to negotiate both closeness and autonomy. Because if you have closeness and you have autonomy, or my sense of my own self, well, then you can go back and forth with each other, and it gets rid of that glommy kind of feeling, right? So you might want to say this, hey, I want to be there for you and I want to help you feel safe. But sometimes I also need my own space. I need it kind of to regroup, or maybe to look forward to our future connections together, which I really look forward to. So that's kind of what I'm noticing goes wrong. What do you think? So see, you send it right back to them, right? But you've also said what you want, not what you don't want. I want to be close, but I sometimes feel like I need my own space, right? I tell you where we really feel like that a lot of times is when we have kids, right? And not to put down anybody's kids, because they're wonderful and they're amazing, but sometimes we can just run around doing all the things they need so much that, boy, at the end of the day, we don't know whether we have our own time, let alone time for our partner. So these are things that need to be discussed, especially with our partner, right? So this is where, can you help me do both? Can you help us do both? Autonomy, right? But also closeness with our partner. So this does require dialogue with people, and it requires regular dialogue, checking in with your partner and checking in for what's going on with that. So just very, very important. With Gottman, because I always like to go back to show that this stuff is grounded in good, solid research from the Gottman Institute, it's called accepting influence. I want to hear what's going on with you. Accepting influence doesn't mean that you agree with everybody and you do everything they say. It means that you're open to really listening to their point of view. And that's extremely important in a relationship. Extremely important. And I talked about that in past shows, so watch them. Okay. So this next one, we like to keep with a theme here, I guess, because like I said, when I look at the mailbag, it's like, another one. My partner avoids conflict at all costs, and it leaves me feeling alone in the relationship. Now, remember from research We need to have bids for connection. Hi, honey, I'm home. Hey, I'm upstairs. And those successful bids need to happen as close to 86% of the time as we can make them. So we don't want to fall short or too short of those, or people start having that abandonment distress because we're hardwired to be connected to our partner. And that's as true psychologically as it is medically. So we need to really remember that, right? So sometimes when people feel danger cues, they avoid, they don't want to talk about things, but we don't have that luxury, right? So one of the things that you might want to do is to look at how much. Let's look at it sometimes. Let's say we want to exercise, right? So let's say I want to go out and I want to jog. But let's say I haven't jogged in a long time. And I go out and say, well, I'm going to run 3 miles. And I get out there and I'm lucky I can make a mile, right? All right. Well, that happens to us sometimes. Well, what happens is it overwhelms our body. That's too much running. Well, that can happen to us emotionally too, right? It can. So what we want to do is we want to create safe space where there's enough talk, but not too much. And then we want to build on it to see if we can build it up, right? So in this kind of situation, if my partner avoids conflict with me at all costs, I think my best practice advice there would be to schedule short meetings and really take turns listening to each other's needs and repeating. This is what I'm hearing you say. Did I get it? So partner feels like, hey, you're listening and you care. The next thing we want to do is we want to go back and see if that helped both of you stay in the conversation. So let's say you do that, and let's say the best you could do is each of you talk for 10 minutes. So prioritize what you want to talk about, but then come back maybe that evening or maybe the next day and say, hey, when we did that extra 10 minutes back and forth, was that too much? Was that not enough? Did you think you could do more? And talk about how you can really make sure both of you are saying, hey, we succeeded in having a nice conversation, but not overwhelming. So that's one of the things I guess I would say to that one. See if I could do a quick one, and then we can go back to our next commercial. Let's see. Sometimes I feel like I need to know everything about my partner's day, but when I try to do that, it pushes them away. How can we find a balance? Well, I want to go right back to the last one I talked about, right? Try to see how much both of you can tolerate, right? But the other thing we want to do is we want to kind of look at how we talk to our partner on this one, okay? So what you want to do is make sure that you honor private space, but you also get your needs met, not only for bids, but for required information. So rather than the 20 questions approach, that might make somebody feel like they're interrogated, right? What we want to do is set aside that 10 or 15 minutes talking about something in your day, but ask questions that get our partner talking more, those open-ended questions that say, tell me more about what you're thinking and feeling, right? Ask those open-ended questions. And if this still falls short for you, be curious about why you're needing the details so that you can bring that to our partner. Sometimes we have thought monsters during the day, things that come into our mind that really make us over worry. Well, I would rather talk about that process rather than act on it, because then you lean to your partner with vulnerable intimacy. But if you have a person that avoids, what you want to do is you want to do that for both of you to have chewable bites. So that sounds pretty good right now. I think this is a good stopping point. We're going to go to the third segment, which is much more of those questions that I was talking about right before the first break. And we can see that game of how, do you do it or not? And then if you do, think about it, and I'll give you best practices. We'll talk to you shortly.
Master of words, powerful player. What life-changing words can Dr. Janet Smith Warfield pull out of her magical toolbox that just might mysteriously open a door you never knew was there? A door to free yourself from fear forever. Transform your rage into right action. Release your guilt. Position you into a life of freedom, purpose, passion, power, and peace. All quite suddenly, unexpectedly, and almost miraculously, with no effort on your part. Join Dr. Janet on Dancing with Words, Dancing with Wisdom, as she and her guests show you how words map our experiences, immersing you in a sound bath that relaxes your muscles, opens your mind, and supports you in co-creating your extraordinary life. show host and coach, John M. Hawkins, reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness: Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals.
All right, we're back. And this is actually probably one of my favorite segments, the third segment, because we really kind of get into the meat of not only the best practices, but also what goes wrong. I want to say again, it's just very important. If you find yourself doing these, don't beat yourself up. I tell you, it happens more times than it doesn't. And there are so many relationships that, we just never learned this when we were in school. And, a lot of times we over rely on just what we've learned, that didn't work. Or maybe we were lucky enough to see our friends and they had families that really did it well. But it doesn't matter. What we always want to strive to do is these best practices, because then you look up and you've been together for 60 years. And that's what we want. The other thing is, remember, when you do this right, we have research that says, you live longer, you're happier. And the other thing is you have less big illnesses. So if you can believe that relationships actually have a say in that, it's a good motivator for us, right? I'm going to say again, we're all in this together. One of the big reasons I do this show for everybody is because it's not out there. So many times, we have these shows that are designed to kind of entertain us, but they give us the wrong message about relationships. So really glad you're here. Tell people about it. Have them play the same games, talk about it, and just let's keep pulling together, because we need to have these relationships. We need them. They need to be healthy, and we need to grow that. Okay. So let's have some fun. We're back to our game. This one is actually, it's funny because I talked about this a little bit with the mailbag, but I'm actually going to take a different angle on it, and you'll see that in a second. All right. This one is globalizing complaints to always and never. Now, you just heard that, right? Makes repair harder, and it amplifies the defensive horseman. But I put this on here for a reason. So here's the partner A in the wrong way. Ready? You never listen to me. Partner B, that's not true. I listened to you once yesterday. Now, again, that can look like it's silly or funny, but this is why I put it in there. That is something called sarcasm. Sarcasm can be funny, but you have to know your audience, okay? Some people don't know what sarcasm is, so they take you at face value. So that could feel like a put down or a dismissing or a minimizing their feelings, right? Right. So we want to do something different with that. So I'm going to talk to you about that. But let's go for a minute. Let me just take a second here and think about, do you do that? Do people use sarcasm? And do they use it too much? Or do they do that when they want to dismiss you or not talk about an issue? Or do you do that to them? All right. So you think about that a little bit as I vamp. All right. So the right way to do it, okay, I don't give you a lot of time because you can freeze it when you watch it again. So the right way to do it is, when I shared about my day tonight, I felt unheard. Could we try again now? Now, again, I'm going to say that may be not how you talk. So take that and do it in your own way, in a good way. Okay. The reason that works in the Gottman method is it reframes the criticism, and sarcasm, by the way, is contempt. So it reframes criticism or contempt into a gentle startup, and it avoids the escalation of the four horsemen. Because remember the statistics on that. If you use a horseman, 96% of the time, not only are you going to get into an argument, but it won't be about where it started. It'll be about a detour into something else. Now you got to get off of that detour and go back to what you wanted to talk about in the first place. Not a good habit. So remember that with sarcasm. The other thing I want to say about sarcasm is you got to know your audience, and you got to know that they think you're being silly, because if you do that, or you start doing that and act like it's innocent, that's called deceiving with the truth. And you don't want to do that either, because then your partner's really confused, or they really kind of say, wait a minute, you just dismissed me and I didn't like it. That can lead to resentment. So watch the horseman. Antidote for criticism is gentle startup, like I said, right? And then the antidote for contempt is, hey, when you said that, it made me feel this. If you don't mind, could you do it this way instead? So we want to make sure we get back to the best practices. Okay, so that's good. So let's see, what do I got here? This one, pretty interesting. This one happens when one partner dismisses the feelings of the other person instead of validating them. So let's see if this one happens for you. The wrong way. I feel anxious when you come home late. That's ridiculous, partner B says. I told you I was fine. Why do I have to keep reassuring you and telling you everything I do? Well, listen to the partner B. Why do I have to do? You even hear it in the tone. Da, 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 da. So what you're doing if that happens is you're criticizing your partner. See what you do? And the other thing is it completely didn't notice the fact that you had a partner that was feeling anxious, right? Anxious is vulnerable intimacy. Hey, I'm feeling vulnerable. You want to bring that to your partner. And partners, you want to encourage your partner to do that, right? So let me stop. Do you do that? Do you find that ever happens with you, or it happens with your partner? Okay, so just think about that. Now, again, later, come back and you guys watch it together. But when I get, this is the right way. When I get, I really get, that's what I wanted to say. I really get that my being late made you anxious. I hear that. I'll text you next time so you know I'm okay. Okay, now that's a countermeasure. Next time I'll do this. But we still didn't get at the fact that somebody felt anxious. So you might say, hey, next time I'll text you. But, what can I do to reassure you so that you do feel safer? You can ask that question. You hear it's an open-ended question. What can I do to make you feel more safe, more reassured? So that's a really good way to do it. And then back to accepting influence. Then you attune in to saying, I want to know. It matters to me that you're upset. So that's kind of how I want to do that. So this is a good way, best practices on that pitfall. All right, let's see. Let's go up. I'm going to have to go up a little ways now because I made some notes in the break. So here we go. We got another one. This is a fun one. I call this one competitive one-upsmanship. All right. So what happens with this one is a partner will compete over some event. So listen to it. See if you can see the event. Partner A, this is the wrong way. I had a horrible day today at work. Partner B, well, you know what? I had a worse day than you did. You think you're stressed. Try living my life for a while. All right. So you hear this one goes to this one. I suffer more. Notice I suffer. What are you talking about? We should be talking about me suffering. Okay. So that's that one-upsmanship I talked about. So do you do that? Have some fun with it, right? Like I said, safety first, but be able to kind of slow down and think about, how do I respond in these ways, right? Okay, good. So try this one this way. This is the right way. Hey, you know what? It sounds like we both had a hard day today. Let's sit down and support each other. Let's sit down and talk about your day and my day, not to compete, but we can listen to how bad your day was that bad. Boy, mine was too. Let's hear about yours first. All right. And then accept influence. Tell me all about it. Get people talking, open-ended questions. For those of you I talked earlier that get overwhelmed and don't like to do this, do it in chewable bites. Maybe you have 10 minutes that you can do that instead of getting too overwhelmed. But work on it with your partner. Okay. So just very important. How do we do that? But I put some notes with this one that I really thought was important. And that is this. A lot of times what I notice with people is when they have a bad day or something terrible happens, they'll talk about it with somebody, right? But who suffers more? Well, what I say to that is it's not a competition. If you're suffering, you're suffering. Doesn't matter. And maybe I don't suffer in that way, right? Let's say somebody's scared of heights. Well, I'm not scared of heights. What's the big deal about heights? I don't compare people's friends as suffering. If you're scared of heights, I want to know all about it. Right? That's empathy. The other thing I like to do is for people who say, well, I'm not scared of heights, I say, what are you scared of? Right? And that's just as valid. So don't compare people's brands of suffering. Really, really, really important. Okay. The other thing is when you do it the way I'm suggesting, it builds that vulnerable intimacy. I'm safe to talk to you about when I suffer. I can let down my guard and not be ridiculed for it. Okay. So for the Gottmans, what they talk about with this is it builds fondness and admiration because you're wanting to build fondness, admiration, loyalty, and respect. And this is one of the best ways to do it, right? Is to listen and care, right? Okay. So the other thing too is when I give you suggestions on how to communicate, make it your own, do it your own way. I don't want you to sound like me. I want you to sound like you. And that's going to be far better for your partner than anything else because they need to hear your voice and your caring. Okay. Remember, no one in the world is more important to your partner than you. You want to maintain that. You want to give them reason to feel that way tomorrow, and you want them to feel that way about you. And that there's nothing wrong with that. That's the way people are, and that makes the world go round. So let's see. I have a couple more minutes. Why don't we do one more, and then we will call it a stage 4, and let's have some fun playing with our assignment for the week. Okay. This one I call resentment banking. This is keeping score. So partner A says, why didn't you take out the trash? And partner B says, oh, please, remember last year when you forgot our anniversary? You can talk. Right. Well, there's a lot going on with this one. I'm going to vamp while you think, do we do this? But there's a lot going on, and I think I could get it done before the break. Okay. So the first thing I would say is the right way, you might say, is this. When you make a request, it sometimes brings up painful memories from the past for me. Let's get the trash out. But we also need to make time for talking about some of those bad feelings that I experienced when you asked me to do something like take out the trash. So we're really addressing two things. Why didn't you take out the trash is to see what you did. Did you hear the criticism? You should be getting better at that. Yes. So you don't want to say that. You might want to say, hey, I'm wondering, I know it's trash day and you usually take it out. Did something happen? Did you forget or did you get busy? Something that kind of assumes a positive about the partner. So from partner A, best practices is go to a gentle complaint rather than a criticism. For the other person, it sounds like it activated, I'm still mad about that anniversary problem. Nothing wrong with that either. But what is bad is we want to get rid of that so we go back to the positive perspective with our partner, not the negative, because the negative is going to cause a mistrust. So what you want to do is to make time away from the trash problem that says, hey, I think that thing with the anniversary upset me. We can't go back in time, but we can't have a do-over. I vote we do something to make up for it. Okay? And again, it isn't I didn't get a present. It's let's celebrate each other in our anniversary. And that gets us back to traditions. We're going to be talking about that more pretty soon because we're coming up on holidays and Halloween and all these things that we could do to celebrate this time of year. Those are traditions. So I'll talk more about that as we get towards the end of our year. All right, so let me look at our time. Looks like a really good place that we can take a break. So you guys come back. We're going to do our game for the week. And boy, hour went fast. We'll talk to you soon.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Master of words, powerful player. What life-changing words can Dr. Janet Smith Warfield pull out of her magical toolbox that just might mysteriously open a door you never knew was there? A door to free yourself from fear forever. Transform your rage into right action. Release your guilt. Position you into a life of freedom, purpose, passion, power, and peace. All quite suddenly, unexpectedly, and almost miraculously, with no effort on your part. Join Dr. Janet on Dancing with Words, Dancing with Wisdom, as she and her guests show you how words map our experiences, immersing you in a sound bath that relaxes your muscles, opens your mind, and supports you in co-creating your extraordinary life.
All right, we're back. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the show. I hope I gave you a lot of good feedback to be curious and to find ways to get back towards connecting with your partner that not only honors your own self, but also honors their needs and wants as well without too much glomming. So, all right. So we're going to have fun this week. Remember, this is one of the things I encourage everybody in our community to do, which is to go and watch this show, think about it, and then go watch it with our partner, and then stop it, talk about different parts of the show, and look at your best practices. Look at, do we do this? Oh, that's not good. Let's do it this way. So we're going to try it. So here's what I say about today. This is our fun game this week. Remember, safety first, but I want you to tune into the show with your partner, especially where I start to talk about pitfalls, right? You can even tune into the mailbag in section 2 if you want, because I had some good ones there too. But before I give the antidote and the Gottman reinforcer, stop the tape and ask, do we do this? Is this something we do? Because believe me, I'll bet you a lot of people do it. You may even talk to somebody in your friend group or your family and say, hey, do you notice we do this? No big deal, but you want to make sure that you do the best practices instead. So before I give the antidote and the Gottman reinforcer, guess. And then what you want to do is to look at the antidote, practice that, and then talk to your partner about how it felt different if you do it that way. Get better with the horseman. I took a little bit more time in practicality about recognizing horsemen and getting them out. Remember what happens if you have a conflict and a horseman comes up, then you're talking about the horseman. You're not talking about the conflict. So now you've got two problems. You got to get out of the horseman, get back to the conflict, and then you got to solve the conflict. Just skip the middleman. Just stay on the conflict gently. Okay. So then what happens is practice that reinforcer, practice the best way of doing it, and then see if that's happening during the week and see if you can catch it happening. If you find one that I haven't talked about, take that billboard I show up at the beginning with all my identifying information. Let me know about it. Maybe I'll get you on that show with that issue. I don't usually name names. But if you give me your first name, I'll say, hey, so-and-so from this state asked this question, or because this is around the world, maybe from England, it may be from Spain. Doesn't matter. What matters is you get the information you need to have that relationship that you want. So, all right. So I want you to stay tuned. I'll be back next week with a new show. And like I said, value your feedback. This is not a fair fight, folks. This is not a fair fight. We are fighting to have good relationships. We're fighting to get foundational in ways that we can look up, and 60 years have gone by and we're still in happy, successful, connected, loving relationships. I do this show because I don't think that these kind of things are out there for us. As a matter of fact, a lot of the stuff we watch on TVs and movies tell us exactly the opposite. It tells us we aren't good looking. It tells us we need to buy this. It tells us that this is how this couple does it, even though it's wrong. That's not good. But we need to have these kind of shows because they will help us to live happy, loving lives. This is Dr. Don Allen. This is all about relationships, working towards ideal marriage and loving, lasting relationships. And I will see you next week.
While All About Relationships is educational and entertaining, it is not a substitute for therapy, counseling, or professional advice, but an informative space for learning and growth. So tune in each week for an engaging and reliable approach to your relationships, ensuring viewers with practical tools to create deeper connections in their daily lives. Whether tackling conflict resolution, emotional intimacy, or family dynamics, this show is your go-to resource for anyone looking to foster healthier, happier relationships in a supportive and lighthearted environment. Every Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern.